During the season of Lent, we have framed all of our sermons around Ellsworth Callis's book, 7 Words to the Cross. And 2 is a very different perspective than 7 Words from the Cross. And you've probably heard sermons around that. But this is the things that had to be the different stages on that journey to the cross in those final hours and moments. First word we spoke about was scorn. Words that were shouted to Jesus as he hung on the tree. And people walking by taunting and shaking their heads. Even the man, one of the thieves, he saved others, he can't save himself. What's wrong with you, Jesus? Are you who you say you are? And then the next word was the late word. By the time Pilate gained the courage to stand up against the crowds, it was after the crucifixion, but it was a sign that he wrote that said, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And when the leaders objected, he said, what I have written, I have written. Then we spoke of the word of indifference. Those soldiers who worked at the foot of the cross. Those who were hardened by the kinds of things that they had to endure every day as part of their jobs, desensitized just as we are today, as we are on a steady diet of media non-stop. Things that are horrific to us or that would have been horrific to us are not as awful as they used to seem. They're not as shocking. Then we spoke of the word of faith. That thief on the cross that believed. And Jesus said to him, today you will be with me in paradise. And last week we spoke of a word of testimony. One of the most unlikely people at the scene of the cross who would actually testify to who Jesus was the centurion. The one who walked with Jesus from the time of his arrest until the time of his death. Every step of the way. He had no reason to particularly believe that, but he saw who this man was and how he lived and how he reacted to the brutality that was inflicted upon him. So today we speak about a courageous word. What does that mean, and how does that fit into the journey of the cross, or the journey to the cross? When we think of heroes, what comes to mind to you? I think about firemen who are willing to rush into that burning building. I think about soldiers. I think of people who jump into the water to save somebody because they see that they're drowning, not because they are particularly equipped, but because they see a crisis and they step into it. Callis says that we don't really know what we are made of inside until the moment occurs that we have to react. We have to make a decision. We have to decide which side we stand upon. How will we react? And it's in those moments that the true elements of our character become known, not only to us, but to those around them. And the cross at Golgotha made for that kind of event, that kind of a showdown. Because people who seem not particularly good or not particularly bad on that day, their character showed itself as they walked past the cross there at Calvary. And as they looked at this man who had been a teacher among them for so many years, and they either most had a word of hate or scorn, a word of anger. People who followed Jesus closely stood back, not certain that they really wanted to be identified with this teacher from Nazareth. This one that, although it seemed okay what he was doing before, now we see him and they're treating him like a criminal. Am I sure I really want to be associated with that? Is that who I am part of? Callis says that we show who we are, who we really are, when we react to pain and tragedy, and also how we react to affluence and success in life. And I thought about that, and I thought, oh, I don't know. And I thought, yeah, that's true. When are we really ready? I mean, when in our lives, let's face it, most of us, I can't speak for everyone here, but most of us don't live these dramatic lives every day where we're called to make life and death decisions, are they? Do we?
No.
We live pretty mundane, safe lives. But it's not until we reach the place to where we have to make that decision about what we believe, about who we are, about what we care about, that the true character of who we are within comes out. You can talk about it all day long, but it's your actions that truly show who you are. The cross not only redeems us, but it shows us who we are and what we are. Away from its light, our sins may seem inconsequential. It's just, I'm just getting along. But in its light, the issues come into sharp focus, and we're forced to decide what kind of people will we be. So at the foot of the cross, that Good Friday, Joseph of Arimathea watches this man. He has been a silent follower of Jesus. He's the one who raised the objection when he was brought before the Sanhedrin. Said, are we sure we really want to do this thing? And he was overruled. But he had been watching this man. He had been witnessing the miracles. He had listened to the teachings. And I believe he was a silent follower of Christ. But on that Good Friday, this man who was affluent, this man who had prestige, this man who grew up in the hills near Jaffa, who came to Jerusalem and grew in prominence and became a well-respected member of community, became a member of the Sanhedrin, and they were the ones who enforced the laws, both secular and religious laws. They were the ones who told the people how it was they were to live and to deal with the disputes. This man who, when he went into the midst of the market, was not only acknowledged, but acknowledged warmly. This man decided that day who he truly was. And the thing is, only a person like Joseph of Arimathea could even have done what he did that day. You see, he already had a tomb hewn out of rock, brand new, never been used. Because that's only what the affluent people did. Regular folks couldn't afford that. He also went to Pilate, directly to Pilate, and appealed for the body of Jesus. Have you ever thought about that? I mean, we kind of read past that. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Pilate was the ruler of the area. Pilate wasn't just his next door neighbor. But he had enough clout, he had enough prominence and respect in the community that he could approach Pilate directly and ask Pilate for the body of Jesus. And after it had been confirmed that he was in fact dead, Pilate granted it to Joseph. And it said in those basically 3 hours from the time Jesus died, which we think was about 3 o'clock, until Sabbath began, which was about 6, he made the decision. He asked for the body. He went and purchased or had purchased enough linen to cover his body. Y'all, it wasn't just a hanky. It was a long piece because he had to get the body down from the cross. And that's part of what they used that fabric for, was they would put it under their hands after they had taken the spikes out, and then they would lower them down. And he wrapped him in that, and then laid him in a tomb and rolled the stone. He did all that in probably about 3 or 4 hours. If Jesus had died a martyr, if Jesus had died a hero, everybody would have been rushing to claim his body and to honor him. But he died on a cross between 2 criminals on a place called the Hill of the Skull. In those days, they didn't bother burying the bodies. Once they took them down, they just tossed them aside and let the animals scavenge the bodies. Ugh. Just the idea of that is horrifying to me. So that's, think of it, it was called the place of the skull. Well, some theologians think that that's one of the reasons it was called that. I know it sort of looked like a skull. But if there are bones everywhere, it is the place of death. And I don't think Joseph could stand the idea of that, of a man that he listened to and he loved, that he believed. He couldn't allow that to happen. But by retrieving and providing a tomb for Jesus, he did something beautiful and dramatically symbolic. You see, by placing Jesus in his tomb, Jesus died for Joseph. Jesus died in our place and in your place, in my place. Laid, wrapped in linens, with a rock rolled over the entrance to keep anyone from getting in or out. It's a courageous time in our lives when we will actually stand up, when we see wrongs that are being committed, when we allow our actions to be more than our words. It's easy to say the right thing. It's much more difficult to do it. And we are called in the light of the cross to always let our actions shine and be something that makes a difference, to stand for injustice, to stand against wrong, to be the voice for the voiceless, all those things you hear me say time and again. And you probably say, I really wish she'd get a new line. She always says that on Sundays. Well, you know, folks, I'm saying that to myself as much to you. We are called to be light. We are called to be salt. We are called to be justice. We are called to be a transforming presence in the world around us. And we each have the opportunity to be courageous. And then maybe your time will be to run into a burning building. I don't know. I think more likely it's going to be when we stand with a friend or a person that we know and we tell them that I am so sorry for what has happened. Or we stand with them and say, no, you weren't treated right. How can I help? How can I be light? How can I be life? So many times I hear people say, well, when I get my act together, I'm gonna do the church thing. I'm gonna be part of a church. I'm gonna make a difference. I'm gonna go talk to Jesus and all those things. And I wanna look at them and say, do you really think the thief on the cross had a chance to get his act together? We so often put off what we should be doing because we want it to be convenient. But my friends, courage is not convenience. Courage is stepping up and stepping out and making a difference. In large ways and in small ways. I guess my question today for you and for me is, what does courage look like for us? When I think about being a Christian, there's a quote that I heard a long time ago. It's by John Shedd, and I love this quote. A ship in a harbor is safe, but that's not what ships are made for. We are called to transform the world. We are called to be courageous. Would you pray with me? Gracious God, for this day, for your love and life, we give you thanks. So now we ask that as we have this time together, Lord, that you would challenge us and that you would grow us, and in all ways, you would lead us into places of light and life. Make us brave, Lord. Make us brave. In your name.